Hello, and welcome to this exciting and important event hosted by the IMF and the World Bank. Today, we will be uniting under a critical message that timely and comprehensive climate risk data are essential for developing smarter, targeted mitigation and adaptation policies. As IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva recently emphasized, the shift to climate-friendly economics not only helps us manage risks, but also opens tremendous opportunities for investment, job creation, and sustainable growth. Financing for both mitigation and adaptation is critical to achieve this goal. To discuss these important issues, we have a brilliant panel today. First, let me introduce Ms. Jadwiga Masinga. Jadwiga, if you could wave for us. Jadwiga is the Director of Climate Change at the Ministry of Land and Environment in Mozambique. She is joined by Stefan Hallegate, Senior Climate Change Advisor at the World Bank. Stefan, good to see you. From the Central Bank of Azerbaijan, we have Shahin Mahmuzade, Executive Director of the Central Bank. And to round out our panel, I'd like to welcome Alessandra Alfieri, Assistant Director at the International Monetary Fund. We're going to jump straight into it this morning. I'm going to start, Alessandra, with you. The IMF considers climate change to be absolutely macro-critical, and it impacts all areas of the IMF's work, whether that's surveillance, leading, or research. Data is critical to informing policies at the IMF level and at the country level. But what are the main data gaps against sort of smarter adaptation and mitigation policies, and what's the IMF doing to close them?
Thank you very much for the question, Matthew. I think that this panel is really about data and how can the data support the development of policies and climate change policies. What we need is actually comparable, accurate, timely, and credible data that can support investment decisions. So significant climate change gaps exist. This is maybe due because the data is not really available. This is a new area of statistics that we are dealing with, or it is because the data is not organized in a way that is digestible to the users. So at the IMF, we are actually trying to address these critical challenges, and we are using different strategies. One of the strategies is bring together existing global data sets and develop internationally comparable macro-relevant climate change statistics. And this is what we have done with the Climate Indicators Dashboard, which brings together macro-relevant indicators to support climate-related policies. We are also using big data and global model to basically put to the attention to the users these emerging areas. And this is the case, for example, of PortWatch, which is a tool that we have launched to calculate trade disruption using Earth observation data. And we are also using a similar approach for measuring climate risks. Which is an area which is increasingly seeing a lot of attention because of the disasters that have been occurring in the recent time. So, of course, these data need to be complemented with national data sets that are often more accurate where they are available. But at least they provide some initial estimates that can be used to inform policy and decision making. So the measurement of physical risks basically entails bringing together information on hazards such as heat, wildfire, floods, and exposure, which could be assets, people, or GDP, or also the exposure to the financial sector, and vulnerabilities, which is basically information that captures resilience of the assets of natural disasters. So global data sets are usually available on hazards and exposure, whether for vulnerability we very much need to look at national data sets. So what I would like to show you today, a tool that we are developing, actually more the results of this tool, to estimate the physical risks. And we are using Mozambique as an example because we actually have a project with Mozambique. So Mozambique is basically prone to floods, and this is a picture that shows really how buildings and structures have been affected by floods. And it is projected that for the next 25 years, there will be more floods coming to Mozambique. So what we are doing is looking at using global data sets. The map on the left indicates the areas that are at risks of being flooded. And in the bottom picture, we actually show, we zoom in on Mozambique and show, zoom in on Maputo and show what are the areas that are exposed, that are at risks of being flooded. I mean, according to the global models, actually, the areas, the center, the downtown of Mozambique is not really prone, although I have learned talking to Jadwiga that there are some floods that are happening in the center itself. And what we are doing is actually overlaying these maps of floods with maps on buildings. So we were able, using different algorithms and different data sets, to estimate the extent, the area of the buildings, and also the height of the buildings, and overlaying it with floods. So we see that the area at the outskirts, which is a little bit shaded, is where the highest risks for floods in the next 25 years is going to be. Also, using global data sets again, we have estimated indicators on the risks to assets in 3 different areas. And we actually see that we have up to 20 times the risks in the area of Pamban to assets. And we use a similar approach, also overlaying this data to using population. And we see that there are up to 20 times the increase, the population being affected by floods in the next 25 years in the case of high emission models. So, I mean, this data is really key to be able to understand where the floods is going to, the risk of floods is will likely hit, and to design measures that, appropriate measures that can actually reduce the impacts. So putting this data out there is really a way to start to understand how we should act, and trying to act ahead of time rather than being reactive and after actually the disasters hits. Thank you, Matthew.
Wonderful, thank you. I mean, that's a brilliant example of how different sorts of data can be brought together. You've got the climate science data, you've got the physical mapping of the physical assets across the city, and you can integrate these to deliver real insights at a spatially targeted level that can help design policies. That's really exciting work. Thank you, Alessandra. I'm going to stick with the theme of Mozambique and come now to Jadwiga, if that's okay. We know that developing countries are disproportionately impacted by climate change, partially because of limited adaptive capacity, reliance on climate-sensitive industries such as agriculture, and higher vulnerability to extreme events. What I'm interested in, Jadwiga, we've seen some examples of the types of data that can support climate policy. Could you tell us about the experience of Mozambique in filling these sorts of data gaps, combining geospatial data in order to address more frequent and severe climate change hazards?
Thank you very much. What I can say, we really have, unfortunately, we have large experience on floods. We experience flash floods in urban areas. We have prone floods areas like in the Limpopo Basin, in the Zambezia River Basin, which are the main. You could see in the second slide, and especially from a very tragic experience in 2000, we developed a set of measures. First, we decided to develop our local plans to define the flood-prone areas in district and community level. Our National Institute for Risk Disaster Management, they did this work to go to all communities. They were using drones, they were using satellite data, and then local knowledge. What areas are flood prone, where we can go to escape from this. So it was combining of that scientific data with local knowledge. We also start to improve our early warning system. You can see there is a president action to have for one district, one weather station. And you could see this map of Mozambique on the right upper corner that we started with very few, and we are now increasing, but still we have challenge to supply this. We also use all kind of information channels like local radios, our cell phones to deliver information to reduce the loss of human lives. And during the last time when we have cyclone, I don't remember the name, in the Zambezia province, which is let's say on the upper part of Mozambique. So we almost, I think we had very few people who died, although the cyclone was quite heavy. So it means that we are really good in this. We also use drones to map our flooded areas. And as I said, our National Institute for Risk Disaster, they decided to establish a kind of quite rudimentary but very efficient system. We have people on the ground who in daily basis, they give us information when we have some kind of event about affected people, victims, about infrastructure which suffered. It's only information what suffered. And then after the event, we have intersectoral groups, teams, which go to the field and then do evaluation of the damage and what is the economic impact of this. So it happens each time. And we rely a lot on the help, like, for example, World Bank, to provide us technical assistance. We also have some platforms. Our National Disaster Risk Management Institute, they have platform with information. We create the entity which is called ADIN, which is the spatial development agency which tries to embrace all spatial, geospatial information and try to link with our National Statistic Institute to have more reliable and geospatial information. We also did two atlas for river basins for Limpopo Basin, not only Mozambique, but the whole basin, all countries, because we established international cooperation to control, to monitor our rivers, our basins, and also for Zambezia River. We have risk maps. We did the evaluation and and mapping for 8 our main bases, which are international rivers. And we also define indicators of risk reduction, but they are more, let's say, infrastructure and social based, not much economic based. So the cooperation between FME, I will tell in sigla in Portuguese, MIF, and IMF, sorry, and our central bank, it's very welcomed. Yes, we really need to link more this economic aspect with our social and environmental as we have right now. Okay, thank you.
That's wonderful. I mean, I'm really excited here because we've been speaking about lots of different sorts of data integration, from global models down to local knowledge, but also social information with economic information, all the sorts of stuff that makes me as an academic really excited. So
my background is the GIS and the land use planning.
Exactly the skill sets we need. I'm going to turn now to Stefan Hallegate from the World Bank. Given these data gaps, I mean, we heard from Jadwiga how they're relying on World Bank support, but also how they're using new innovative technologies. And what I'm interested in is, how is the World Bank supporting countries in leveraging new technologies like AI and machine learning, big data, combining this sort of information to turn data into actionable insights?
Yeah, so I think it's a very important point. We're facing two key challenges. Right? One is the data gaps, and I think in a lot of the countries we're working in, we don't have the data that is just very common in rich countries. But making decisions with the data we have is also a key challenge. And so I can illustrate that with one example for resilience, where we were asked to track and monitor better the impact of our own actions to help countries build resilience. And of course, if you're here, you know, measuring resilience, measuring adaptation is a really key challenge. And we had, of course, to do it very quickly, as always. And so we started to try to develop an count of the number of people living at very high risk, globally and at the country level, so that we could track progress in the world and track the result of our actions. And here, over the short run, the key challenge was integrating data from different sources. So you had geospatial data for hazards, transportation data, but also household surveys, which very often are at admin level, and you don't have the spatial dimension in it. And so I don't want to go into the details, but basically what the work was to take different household surveys, try to merge them, and then overlay them with spatial data to get to this count. And so you see that the map here showing the number of people exposed to those risks and the number of people at high risk because they don't have access to insurance and social protection and education and so on. But I think as we were doing this, the two things that really were striking to me is, first, there is a lot of data, and sometimes we don't know how to use it. And especially geospatial data, very quickly you talk about terabytes of data, and if you're in a country with limited connectivity and so on, using it is really hard. So a lot of the work we have been doing is to try to make this data easier to use, simplified, but in a way that starts from the demand, from the decisions that need to be made, so that you don't just simplify in the wrong way. That's for the short run. Over the long run, I think we have to get better at getting the right data so that we don't have to mobilize all of those methodologies to merge data sets and so on. And here I wanted to note two things that we're trying to do. One is on household surveys themselves, to make them better able to capture resilience. And for instance, what we want to do is to have a completely integrated system where when you have a disaster, you can do an additional data collection in the area affected very quickly, using different tools, not only people going into the places, but also using phones, using internet, so that you integrate the type of household surveys we're doing every few years in countries to understand the population with the specifics we need for disaster management. Right now, it's 2 tracks. We want to make that 1 track. This is an initiative called Resilience Future, and it means building statistical agencies in countries to make them better able to do it, so it's not cheap. And the second point I wanted to mention is we're trying to identify the key gaps, and one we identified, for instance, is on children. So we don't always have the information on the situation of children that would allow us to make the right decision in terms of targeting. So you might want to have like a specific data package on that because it's a very highly vulnerable population. And all of the artificial intelligence, all of the satellites and so on, this is all great, but it's never where we start from, right? You start from the decision that needs to be made, Sometimes you need to mobilize, and you can mobilize those solutions, but we have to be very careful not to make it like a sort of a supply-side, technology-driven process, right? It's always starting from the needs.
I think that's a great reminder to those of us who are interested in using these technologies. You must always start with a clear objective, usually a policy question. That's really exciting. I must say, I'm at the new Bennett Institute for Innovation and Policy Acceleration at the University of Sussex, where actually AI and data, big data for sustainability and geospatial data for sustainability is a major research initiative led by Felix Kreutzig, my colleague at the institute. So I'm looking forward to lots more collaboration there with the bank. These sorts of issues are just as relevant in Berlin as they are in Boston, as they are here in Baku. We've had extensive discussions now on physical risks from climate change, but it's not just a physical risk issue. There's also risks that come about as we transition away from a fossil fuel-based economy to a greener, leaner, more sustainable economy. These transition risks manifest themselves in regulatory changes, in technological advancements, in changing market dynamics, and they affect businesses and financial systems across the board. What I'd like to do now is turn to you, Shahin, as Executive Director of the Central Bank here in Azerbaijan. Can you tell us about how the bank is working to identify the impacts of transition and secure the financial system here in Azerbaijan?
Thank you very much for the question. We started our journey last year. In last February, we launched our first sustainable finance roadmap as a central bank, and it's coming from the scratch. And first we start with the surveys from the financial sector. What is the awareness of the sector in Azerbaijan? And so what we can develop here. To be honest, the results were not that good. In the developed countries, the regulators are trying to catch up the financial sector, but in developed countries. But in developing countries like Azerbaijan, you should drive the change. So the financial sector will not be there if you don't demand from them. And we identified 4 main blocks that we should work on. First was the capacity building, not only in the financial sector, also at the central bank as well. So we should educate our supervisors so that they can supervise if there is greenwashing or not. Also, we should create the capacity in the banking system mainly so that they can analyze, they can use the data to quantify the risks and to manage this risk with the capital planning or in the pricing of the loans. We had several workshops and site visits also to more advanced countries with the leadership of the central bank. And also IMF and World Bank has many workshops here for the local banks. And the second one was closing the regulatory gap for the local financial system. We start with the ECG principles. We launched it this year, and we made several guidelines for the bank risk management, for their loan guidelines. And we start all with the guidelines, because the regulatory change or the policy making is kind of two-edged blade. If you make it more tough, it will be on the paper, and it's not going to be implemented. And if you make it too easy, there will not be enough change that you want. And 3 days ago, I'm happy to share that we launched our local taxonomy, also developed with the help of the World Bank technical expertise. And in the next coming years, we are going to work on the ECG stress testing and to make it mandatory, the green loans, the green bonds, and to link it to our national taxonomy. And the third part was the risk management, the main block, one of our blocks. And as you know, in the also Basel core principles, the ECG risk became the part of the some elements. And we try also to include this ECG risk management in our stress testing framework. And we also had one project with IMF on the transition risks. And the fourth pillar for us was the transparency and disclosure. And we are starting from the next year, we are going to do some requirements about the disclosure standards and about the reporting system between us and the banks. And plus, we have some consideration about greening our monetary policy. And plus, one compulsory insurance, green insurance product for the country. So we are right now thinking how we can do it. It should be about the physical risk or the liability risk. But still, we have plans till 2027. And I'm happy to share also that the bank system voluntarily committed that they are going to green their loan portfolio around 10% in next 6 years. So the size comparing to the developed countries is not that much in amount, but in percentage, it's a huge step from our local financial system, and we hope that we are going to achieve this as well. Thank you very much.
Sounds like lots of really exciting progress and lots of initiatives sort of across the board. That's really exciting to hear. I'm going to turn back to Alessandra now. We know about the importance of having good data on both physical and transition risks for fiscal and financial policies. Can you tell us about what the IMF is doing in ensuring that macro-relevant data is actually available to support policy decisions regarding these risks?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Matthew, for this question. So the IMF actually has launched an environment and climate change statistics program in 2021. So we are quite, let's say, new in this space, but I mean we are really catching up and focusing in particular on areas that are macro critical. So we are working, the program of work is structured in 4 pillars. The first pillar is on capacity development. We are working now in 10 countries, supporting them to develop and strengthen environment and climate change statistics program, working primarily with national statistical offices, central banks, and Ministry of Finance, but I mean establishing an interinstitutional collaboration at the country level. What we discussed before is really the main issue is integrating data from different data sources and bringing together different stakeholders at the country level. Our focus has been primarily in supporting countries of developing energy and air emission accounts, that is linking energy and air emission data to economic activities so that this can serve as input in macroeconomic models. But we are also working on physical risks in the case of Mozambique and on transition risks with Azerbaijan, Barbados, and other countries. We are also rolling out a training program because I think that there is a need of capacity development that ranges from targeting high-level officials to understand the importance of climate data and how they can be used for policy, and also to the technical level, really teaching how to compile and put together this data and develop a program which is fully integrated within the statistical development. The second pillar is data. So I mentioned before this climate indicators dashboard, which is basically among, let's say, the ecosystem of data and platform. The objective is really to put together macro-relevant indicators that can support the decision-making within the bank, within the fund, sorry, and also more broadly to other users. So as part of this, we are now developing a set of agreed charts and indicators that are going to be used in Article 4 consultations. The third initiative, I would say, is this statistical methodology, and I think it's the objective here is integrating climate change and environment in existing statistical standard. And this is kind of providing the seeds for having comparable and credible data available in the future. This is kind of a process, and have this data being developed as a regular production process and not as a kind of an ad hoc exercise. So the system of national accounts and the balance of payments manual are at the last stages of their update, and they will include more more measures on sustainability and the environment. And the update of government finance statistics manual, for example, will include the methods on climate-related subsidies and expenditures. So the idea is to develop a common language and a standardized way to compile information at climate at the same level as we compile information on economic statistics. The fourth pillar is really working together with other international agencies. I mean, the IMF does not really have the expertise on climate science, so we do need to bring together different experts to support and to provide data that is needed for macroeconomic policies and for financial policies. And in particular on the physical risks, what I mentioned before, we are working very closely with our colleagues on the World Bank. They have a very detailed data sets on heat and precipitation, and we are strengthening the collaboration. We are working with the European Space Agency. We are working with the Basque Center for Climate Change, and at the country level, we are trying really to bring together all the different players, including mapping agencies, environment ministries, disaster risk reduction, to be able to integrate this data in a common framework.
It really is a very full program of work across the board. For those of you who haven't, if there is anybody who hasn't been there yet, I fully endorse and recommend going and checking out the Climate Change Indicators dashboard. It's an outstanding resource, especially, I think we might have some students in the audience. This should be one of the places you check out for really good information.
Just one other thing I wanted to mention is the Data Gap Initiative, which was launched by the Ministers of Finance and Central Bank's governor in 2021, that recognized the need for filling the data gaps on climate, and they have 7 of their 14 recommendations are on climate data, and in particular on energy and their emission accounts, the carbon footprints, the climate finance, physical and transition risks, and expenditures and finance related expenditures and subsidies related to climate. And the objective here is develop methodologies not only for the G20 countries, but really roll it out broadly, because these are themes that are actually relevant for developing countries as much as developed countries.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. This is a challenge, sort of combining the scientific environmental data with the economic data in a format that allows economic insights to affect our scientific research and scientific insights to affect economic policy. That is a challenge across the board, every country in the world, regardless of development status. But that capacity building efforts are really bringing up the ability in developing countries. One of the things that's near and dear to my heart as a professor of sustainable finance is the idea that the risk metrics that we use and that we develop cannot just be backwards looking. It's not that helpful for me to say, well, after the fact, something was risky. If I'm trying to allocate capital and make a financial decision over where to invest, I need forward-looking risk measures that tell me about where these risks are coming down the line in the future. That's what's most important to me. And so what I'd like to do now is turn to our colleague Jadwiga. What do you see are the main challenges in Mozambique to developing and using forward-looking metrics to assess physical risks?
Thank you very much. I think that one of the main problems is to translate all this scientific data, all those findings, that information, into feasible advice for our decision maker. Because we can have those very beautiful maps, we can know where we shouldn't put our infrastructure, or how we should put infrastructure to survive floods. But still, if there is no political knowledge and willing to use this data, it will be only data. It will be only information, scientific for research purposes. So why, as a Minister of Environment, we develop a set of capacity building for our local leaders, for our technical staff in provincial and district level, and also for our leaders, traditional leaders. We call that is the smallest group as G8. So they should do very basic, very easy land use planning to exactly avoid continuous loss of people and infrastructure. We even did, how you call in English, it's a graphic novel. I don't know if I'm correct saying this. Okay, but it was designed because we know that a lot of our people they illiterate still. So we use this graphic novel to show what kind of variables they should use if they want to establish settlement. We still have people who are moving around looking for better conditions for life, a better place to do agriculture. So what they should look as local leaders, this kind of things. We also, but it doesn't mean that we are using only this rudimentary thing. We have very good researchers, we have very good GIS specialists on different fields from agriculture to even nuclear science using this. So we have access to modern technology. Although, Stefan, I don't know if you've been in Mozambique, but what you were saying, I was looking and, maybe Stefan was in Mozambique because he knows very well that we have problems with internet. Very simple problem like computer doesn't work because there is no antivirus or energy is not coming. So we still have these challenges, but also we have institutions and brilliant people who can use this modern technology. Maybe we can need some more push. Maybe we need more collaboration with our universities to be sure that new generation are using this technology, and when they become our new leaders, they will base their decision on the scientific knowledge. We do some data management, although it's not very good. Unfortunately, what I'm saying that in Mozambique, we constantly have problems with dissemination of the data. There are institutions which has got data and they don't disseminate. And also this institutional memory. We lose a lot of data which we produce, unfortunately. And we still work to improve our policies. Now we are working on our strategy, and we would like really to bind our institution to use this data for decision making. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the use of graphic novels. At Cambridge, we actually developed a new superhero named Statman, who goes around the world trying to solve the world's problems by improving the statistics at use. So in addition to forward-looking risk measures, and I'm always in support of any call to get government agencies, central banks, national statistics offices to engage more closely with the scientific community and with the academics. So thank you for that. In addition to forward-looking risk measures, we also need data that is internationally comparable. So if I could come to you, Stefan, what are the barriers to agreeing sort of internationally comparable measures of physical and transition risk? And what's the role of organizations such as the bank in trying to overcome those barriers?
Thank you. Just answering your point, because so practical constraints like access to this data is really, really important, and we should really not forget that. And every time you have this announcement that, the new models will have a resolution of 20 centimeters now, I'm just thinking like, gosh, now the size of this damn file will be so big. Who will be able to use that? And so one of the things that we're doing with the Climate Change Knowledge Portal is to just do aggregation, and we're trying to use our experience and our partnership with countries to understand their needs so that we can make those files smaller, easier to navigate, easier to download, without losing the information that shouldn't be lost. And so I think this work with the experts in climate science, because we're not also like a climate agency, right? But we're using our engagements with users to help the climate scientists simplify the information in a way that's useful for the users. And so I think that was a very, very important point, because we can always increase the resolution, right? And making it more difficult for people to use the information. Now I'm getting to your point, because I think at the risk of making the conversation even more complicated, I think once upon a time, it was very easy to understand what data was. It was just like you had a measurement and you had a household survey. These days, the mix between what is data and what is a model output gets really, really fuzzy, right? All of the models are being processed in different ways, and sometimes what we call data is not really an observation. It's a model output. And with different models, different quality, it's very much more complicated to understand what am I looking at? Is that really a data point, or is it somebody making an assessment of something? And if you're looking at the risks for the future, that's really one of the key challenges. So one of the things that we've been doing at the World Bank to help think about transition risk especially, but also physical risks, are country climate and development reports. Those reports we're doing country per country, so that we can really start from the bottom up and have a set of policies that make sense for the country and try to highlight what are the risks that would come with those policies. And maybe I'm missing the competition for the messier slide of the day. But what I wanted to just show you is you have to do it at the country level. All of what we're doing with these global models and so on is great and extremely useful. But if you really want to engage country per country, you need the scenario to be designed in the country with people in the country who are decision makers or stakeholders. And of course, the challenge is the point that you're making. Then we have those scenarios, and they are not comparable. And I think I won't answer your question, because I don't have a solution for that. There is just no way of doing something which is exactly what you need in every country and to keep the comparability. And so what we're saying is there is really a complementarity between what you find, for instance, the IEA is doing energy scenarios at the global level, and it's top-down, driven by the global goals. And we're doing CCDRs at the country level from the bottom up. And it's not that one is better than the others. It's just like we need those different angles to answer the questions.
I think that's absolutely right. So we need both. We need the global macro picture, but we also need actionable information for individual countries who are going to have to design and deliver and implement the policies. I think that's absolutely right. We are coming to the end of our session, which means you are in the audience here with us in Baku are going to be on the hook for some questions in just a few moments. So do think about what questions you might want to ask to our panelists. But in the meantime, I'll come back to you, Shahin. We know that there's some integration, some collaboration going on between yourselves and the IMF. Could you tell us a little bit about how data sharing efforts between different stakeholders are helping you pursue these sorts of issues through the central bank?
Okay, thank you very much. The transition slides are not that fancy and physical slides, because we also did some earthquake analysis as you did for the flood and droughts. But what you are going to assess and what the data you need, it depends on your financial systems, the loan portfolio types, the classification of your industries. And when we start to do, as I said in the first, for the first question, we are going to do to introduce some Pillar 2 buffers for the banks, for mainly the ECZ elements, which is also in the discussion globally. So what is the risk for the banks? The physical risk or the transition risk? The geographical position of the Azerbaijan shows that we are not prone so much to the physical risks. The earthquake is the main risk for us, which is not climate risk. So the transition risk as a high dependency to the oil economy, the transition risk is more important for us. So I agree with my colleague that you should come from country-specific data. You should look to your country and you should create your own scenarios, and you should do your own, let's say, assessments. So we start with the transition risks rather than the physical risk. So comparing to physical risk, transition risk is much more complex. What I mean, like in physical risk, you know that there is flood, so what can be affected, and if there is drought, what can be affected? The agriculture, where you have these sectors, and what is the volumes of the assets there. But for transition risks, it's going through the liquidity credit market, and it's not one-year job. You need like the preferences, the change in the preferences of the consumers, the change in the regulations are taking like much more time. So the capital planning for the transition risk is much more difficult. And that's why we did this transition risk assessment with the IMF to understand what are unknown unknowns. So without this, we cannot create any stress testing or etc. So we start with the risk drivers. We identified 4 main risk drivers, which are the market change, the change in the preferences of the consumers. So what means we need to understand the behaviors of the consumers locally. What Azerbaijanis are going to change in their shopping habits, in their preferences for different products, and how it can affect the firms here. And the second one was the regulatory change globally, which is going to decrease the dependency to oil, which is going to affect our exports, so some local sectors. The third one was the delayed transition risks. So if we are going to transit now, the later will be, we are going to transit, the more costly it will be. And the fourth one was about the connection between physical risk and the transition risks. As I said, physical risk is not that important for us, more affectable for us, but still have some linkages with the transition risks. And afterwards, we identified the transmission channels, how it's going to affect our financial system, and what data we need. So we just know that what unknowns what we had before, and we created the roadmap for the transition risk, and we divided it to 2 spaces. What central bank can do with these subtech projects, with the credit data registry, and what data we need from our colleagues from the ecological ministries and other ministries. And I think it's a 2-year job, and at the end we hope to have this ECG stress testing for transition risks. And thank you very much. I think I overrun the.
No, my poor timing. I apologize, but thank you for being succinct in your comments. I think we have time for one quick question from the audience. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Abdul. I'm the technical lead for Start Network, a UK-based charity, and we are also working in these fields, building catastrophic model in countries. And the key things I realize is like sometimes when we are using the data from global platform, we realize there is some discrepancies among those data and the local data. We are working like locally led, so. And then those discrepancies actually lead to some basis risk events. And when we are talking about climate hazard, basis risk may be very costly for communities. So what are you guys doing to actually strengthen the local countries' capabilities to stock data instead of investing only on global platform, which may be sometimes not reflecting the realities
Brilliant.
of things
Thank you.
on the ground? What are we really doing to improve those countries' capabilities to provide hydrometeorological live data?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to sum it up succinctly. How can we get even more spatially explicit data for local communities to be able to understand these risks?
I think that the point that you raise is really important, because what we are doing at the global level is using global data sets, but then what we have to do is grounded at the country level, because that's where the decision making is taking place. So they have, I was just discussing with Jadigua. We developed this global, using global data sets, this estimate, but the idea is that we will go and visit and sit down with the local authorities and then trying to develop national maps that then can support the policy and decision making at the country level. And sometimes, having an external person coming to the countries can also help in bringing together and facilitating this discussion and improving the national data sets.
Thank you. I think in the interest of time, we have to leave it here. It's clear that we want more discussion on this. Please do get in touch. All of our speakers are easily findable online. We've got some links up on the slides. This session has been recorded and will be available online. If I could just sum up very briefly, I think the key issues we've come out with are we need to focus not just on physical risks, but on transition risks as well. We need data sources to integrate environmental and scientific data with economic data, and economic data with scientific data. That's a reciprocal relationship. We need to increase capacity across agencies that don't normally engage directly with environmental science data. So that means we need to build in skills across central banks, finance ministries, national statistics offices, and academics and universities as well. There needs to be lots of cooperation across these different agencies and institutions, and there's lots of work going on around the world. Please check out these links that we have up on the slides, and please join me in thanking our brilliant panel today.